Hello and welcome back to Conversations That Matter from the wisdomfactory.net. I'm Heidi Hörnlein and I have created the Wisdom Factory with my husband, Mark Davenport, who unfortunately died this year. And so I wanted to continue the sessions and I wanted to have a male co-host, and I asked Martin Ucek, who will be, you will see him later, to be a co-host with me. And today's session is called Psychological Basis of Human Behavior. And our guest is Dr. Oren Amitay, who had already been on the Wisdom Factory in January or February this year. And you can find his contributions. It was about conscious aging and what is about men when they're getting older on the wisdomfactory.net under Conversations That Matter. And you will find the whole list there. So before we go into the subject, I would like to invite you, Oren, to present yourself, who you are, where you are, and so on. Okay.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me on again. It's Oren Amitay. I'm a psychologist in Toronto, Canada. I have a clinical practice where I see 15 to 30 patients a week. I do assessments for the courts for families and parenting, and I teach at university. Currently, I've been teaching at Ryerson University for nearly 20 years, maybe I think 18. Many different courses. I've taught at 4 other universities. In total, I've taught 20, about 170 to 180 times over the last almost 20 years. And I talk a lot in the media, do a lot of podcasts. So, yeah. I've got a big mouth that I'm ready to use.
And that's really great. And that's how I got to know you, because I saw some of your contributions. And I hope we can come to, when you say with a big mouth, to some insight why people behave as they behave. Why some, yes, you say, have a big mouth in a good sense, or some have a big mouth in not so good sense. And what I wanted to ask you, later we see what Martin wants to ask you, I wanted to ask you, how come this phenomena of trolling, or of people going into Facebook, for instance, and mix up whole threads, or even we had it in live conversations on Zoom, that one person is always needing to be right, and who is not accepting his good advice, they are arrogant, because he knows what people need and things like that. So how come that people have this need to be right all the time and to impose themselves on others? That would be my interest. Sure. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I mean, there's many different reasons. So I'll give a few of them, and I probably won't get all of them. So for one, there are some, and people throw this word around all the time, and I actually deal with them quite frequently. I more often I will deal with them in an assessment regularly. And I'll usually deal with the people who suffer through them in my clinical practice. So I have many siblings, children, spouses, and coworkers of a certain personality type, whether it's a psychopath or a narcissist. All psychopaths are narcissists. Not all narcissists are psychopaths. Okay. So there are far more narcissists than there are psychopaths. And there's different types of narcissists. The worst being a malignant narcissist. They are a couple of degrees below psychopath, almost a less successful psychopath. But they all kind of share this lack of regard for other people's needs, lack of consideration for them, lack of, let's say, ability to take their perspective. And that's the key thing, because that one last trait, that inability or lack of desire to see things from other people's perspectives, is literally the number one ingredient that can lead somebody to do something terrible. Now, trolling doesn't have to be terrible, although sometimes can reach terrible depths. But the fact is, they don't care about the impact on other people, or it just doesn't come to them. Because some narcissists are not bad people, but they just don't see it from other people's perspective. So they say something and they think they're being helpful. like someone who gives lots of advice and then gets upset when they're not being listened to. So, they might not necessarily be doing it with bad intentions, but the outcome's the same because they didn't think, this person is grieving, or this person is at a loss, or they're hurt or scared. So how can I frame it in a way that they would best receive it, rather than think that I'm beating them over the head or being rude? So you need to have empathy. You need to be able to see it from the other, to be properly. And narcissists don't have that, and they just don't care to do that. So that's one of the biggest problems. And the problem is that this lack of empathy, and I don't mean complete absence, because that would be like a psychopath, but kind of directing one's energies to trying to see things from another person's perspective, spreading amongst so many people. And the number one reason that is social media. It's the internet. And I'm not a fear monger. I'm not a technology hater. Hey, I wouldn't be talking to you if it wasn't for the internet. Appeared. Oh, there you are. Okay. Sorry, I don't know what the audience is seeing, but I saw black for a second.
Yeah,
but in any event, okay. So when you have a lot of your communications through the internet, especially younger people whose primary socialization is coming through the internet, they are lacking in the face-to-face, eye-to-eye, person-to-person communication or exchanges that creates empathy. Okay, we're not just born with this naturally. All right, in fact, kids are what we call them egotistic, but I don't mean egotistic as in has a big ego. It's in the sense that they only see things from their own perspective. It's not till maybe 6, 7, 8 where they realize, oh, other people have different perspectives. I always tell people the easiest one is, like, I used to do this with my kids. They could be looking at a book 3 rooms away from me, and they go, Daddy, look at this. And I'm going, that looks great, honey. They don't know that I can't see what they're showing me. They see it all from their perspective. So, we have to develop that capacity. Now, there's part of it's mental development, part of it's social development. And again, when you don't have that daily, constant interpersonal, like face-to-face interpersonal exchange, you don't develop in the same way. Now, somebody could say, well, how about in school? They're seeing kids in school and they're seeing their family. Yes, they are. That's one element. But it's with your peers as you get older where you really start to, relate to each other. You really start to understand what boundaries are. You cross those boundaries and then you suffer for that. And that's the part that's missing. And I can suffer if I cross a boundary and I say something hurtful or offensive or inappropriate or wrong. I can suffer in one of several ways. One is I see the person's reaction. If I'm not a psychopath and I see someone respond in terror or hurt or pain, I get triggered and realize, whoa, I don't want to do that to that person, right? It triggers something in our brain. My mirror neurons get fired and I realize I don't want to feel this way. I don't want to, do this to them. So without that face-to-face, I don't get that. Or the second way it happens is that they might retaliate. I might get punched in the face. I might, who knows? They might, or the third way is other people will show me what's right or wrong. They might come in and say something, or I get ostracized. I get excluded. I don't get invited to all the parties and so on. And that's not happening online. Online, if I say something really terrible, I might actually get rewarded for it. Right. And I get encouraged for it. And now I'm being, what's the right word here? Reinforced for that behavior. Right. So whether it's a bunch of likes or whether people pile in or they validate me. So this is one of the main reasons we're seeing such incivility, such lack of concern for other people's welfare, through, even just simple lack of, let's say, civility, and realizing, or they should realize that if I come into a thread, I shouldn't be trampling on over everybody. I shouldn't be saying things without thinking about the impact on others. I shouldn't expect everybody to treat me like a god because I give my advice. Anyway, that kind of socialization is not happening enough in younger ages, and other people, even if they're our age and have lived a normal life up until the last 15, 20 years, that 15 and 20 years, that can shape how we relate to other people. Again, we're not going to suddenly become psychopaths, but we can our norms about social conduct can change. And and part of it also is a big part of it is the norms. If everyone is doing things a certain way, we're social animals, so we adapt to that. We start doing things the same way as well. And again, I'm seeing this happen with people of all ages, even people who were socialized properly. So that's kind of, I'm trying to hit as many targets as I can with that answer as to why people do this. Let me just add one more. The other one is, and this, I hate giving this answer because it sounds so pop psychology, but there's a reason that we have like cliches in pop psychology, because it is common. And the last one is, or last few of them, are people who are either very insecure, who don't feel accomplished, don't feel they have a purpose, don't feel validated enough in their daily lives, right? Either they try to seek all of that through this type of effort, or what they try to do is they try to elevate their sense of self, their self-esteem, by reducing others. And that's another reason people do this.
Yeah, maybe also to get negative attention when they don't get positive attention.
And that's a common behavior in children as well, and adults. Yes, any type of attention is good if they don't feel they're getting enough attention. Because in the old days, it's also whenever we see reprehensible groups, or this whole thing that happened this year, called incels. It happened in Toronto, like a couple of, not that far from where my office is right now, where this horrible monster got into a van and drove down the most popular street in Toronto, longest street in the world, and killed a bunch of people and injured others. And he's what's called an incel, involuntary celibate. Nobody had heard of this term until that news. Okay. And then everyone was talking about it. And the problem is, in the old days, this guy would have been sitting in his basement all alone, stewing, having these thoughts in his mind. Basically, he hates women, he hates society, he feels he's entitled to have people accept him when he's acting unacceptably. Okay, so in the old days, he would have just been stuck alone. It would have bounced in his head. He would have got angrier and angrier, but it wouldn't have really gone anywhere. And a few people would have taken it somewhere, okay? Maybe 1 out of 1,000 of these people who are getting so angry in the basements alone might actually act on it. But today, they have a voice. They can go anywhere. They can lash out. They can find other like-minded people, which, will really reinforce their behavior, and it makes them even more extreme. And now there's like, oh, if I act on my anger, my impotent rage, if I actually put it into effect, I'm going to actually get validated here because other people are doing it as well. And no normal person glorifies or validates what they're doing, but these other people in these little corners, they do. And if you find a group like that, that can encourage you to do it, because now you've got their, and I hate to keep using this word, their validation. All right. And it doesn't have to be as horrible as someone going out and murdering. But again, even just attacking somebody, even jumping on the bandwagon of, you did something wrong, we're going to socially shame you, any of that, it gives you a sense of belonging. And even if it's a reprehensible group. And as social animals, we need that. So that's the other reason people act this way. The internet has started the way that we relate to others.
So when I have understood it right, there are 3 reasons why people behave, or they are psychological, they have some impairment, let's say. Then the other one is a developmental thing, that they just cannot, they have never grown up in a way that they can have empathy. And the third one is just, I do it because I can.
And it's a social phenomenon too, right?
Sorry?
It's a social phenomenon.
Exactly. All right, that's part of it
too. Social media phenomenon, I wanted to say.
Right. But it's also a social phenomenon too, right? If that's what people are doing, if that's the norm, it's acceptable for me, or they think it's acceptable for them to do a certain thing because it's being done by others. And that's the problem with these groups. It makes it look like even more people have this type of thinking. If 10 out of 10 people around you have the same disturbed thought and are doing the same terrible things, it makes you think, oh, maybe 90%, maybe 100% of people are doing this, because that's what you're surrounded by. And again, before social media, before the internet, people wouldn't have had the opportunity to see so many like-minded individuals.
Yeah, and that is in the good and in the bad, that in the good is, for instance, you meet people all over the world and which are like-minded. and we can co-create something together, or you meet these people you are talking about, and then they think that's normal. That's
Right.
because they don't see that there is no social control from outside. Before, in the families, in the village, in the city, there is always somebody who says, oh, no.
Right.
But when you have a close group like those people and everybody thinks that way, then they have the illusion that everybody thinks this way, and behaves this way, and that it is right to do so. Reinforcing, it's a sort of a spiral to reinforce. Mm-hmm.
And you just said something when you talked about the reinforcement. It's either everyone thinks this way or everyone good thinks this way, everyone right thinks this way, because, and I'm not sure how it is out in Germany, but in Canada and America right now, for the last number of years, the left, okay, and this is funny because everyone misunderstands me, just because, and it's not just me, it's a lot of people, but just because we're disgusted by how so many people on the left are acting, we don't want to associate ourselves with them, so people assume we must be right-wing. And anyone who knows me knows I'm the opposite of right wing. I'm very liberal in my views, and and I used to be left. It's just that they just don't know how to act properly. So in their case, they're acting just as badly as this other guy. But A, there's a lot more of them doing it, and B, they know lots of people don't think like they do. They just assume these people are bad.
And this is another confusion, to give value judgments together with what is. But Martin, you wanted to say something, it seemed to me.
Yeah, and we're going there, I think, a little bit. What about, I mean, it seems like, Oren, everybody has a need to be somewhat right and validated in the way we see the world, right?
Right.
And what is the underlying reason for that?
Well,
in what we would call healthy or normal people.
Right. So I tell people, I tell my students and my patients that the most important goal of human functioning truly is to learn to master or control our environment. So being right, okay, is by definition almost proof that we've mastered something, or we're under control. And in many cases, it's an illusion. I can control this much of my life right around me, and I can't control 99.999, etc. of the world. Okay, so for some people, being able to control their immediate environment is an illusion, like I'm in control of much more than I am. And for others like me, it's like, okay, I'm in control of what I can control, right? And so I don't need to be right in other contexts. I don't need to get a broader validation. I just need to make sure, and this is the way I think, okay, that I'm taking care of my little corner of the universe, and my job, the people who depend on me, the people I depend on, people I relate with, and so on. Okay, so I can see all this from an outside perspective, see myself from an outside perspective, and so I know how much right I need to be. Now I get tripped up as well because I'm a human being. Okay, so sometimes I will just have to keep going and drive my point home, right? Because we want to be right, but underneath all of that, underneath it all, at the most deep psychological level, is this need to feel, even if it's not real, to feel like I'm in control. Because if I'm in control, I'm safe, I'm secure, right? And that's a very important human need, is to feel that, because that need to feel, again, that safety and security, that's such a primal need. It can drive so many of the phenomena that we see that might not even look like it's connected, but somehow we can trace it back and go, oh, that's why they're acting in this seemingly irrational way, or whatever, because it all boils down to this need to feel this way. Because the opposite of that, the opposite of safety and security, is fear. It's lack of control, and fear, lack of control, it leads to helplessness and hopelessness. And those two are, some of the most terrible feelings that anybody could experience. And it's so terrible that hopelessness is the #1 predictor of suicide. Like, that's how terrible it can be. When you feel that, that nothing is going to change, and I have no impact on the world, and the world can, again, just be my little world. If I feel no sense of self-efficacy or self-agency, and I don't think anything's ever going to change in life, why would I continue to live a miserable existence?
Right. But that at least you can control. You have control over taking your own life.
Well, yeah,
And I wanted to say in this context, is it then that to try to get a sense in life, they do these things, these offensive or unsensible things, and to demonstrate power where they don't really have it, or things like that, or make negative attention, because instead of developing a real innate power, they sort of, what is Dampfwalze in English? They go like
steamrolling.
Yeah,
steamroller. Yeah,
these big machines over the streets. So they flatten everything by their attacks and things like that. Is that a possibility that out of helplessness you get aggressive and strange, trolling, or whatever? You said it at the beginning, but I would like to go a little bit deeper into that.
Well, for sure. I mean, if you think of the old saying, they say that like a cornered animal is the most dangerous. So, right. So people they can start lashing out. And much of what I'm saying, by the way, a lot of that is an unconscious process. It's not like someone sitting down and thinking, well, I feel powerless, so I'm going to do this by, I'm going to achieve this goal. But they don't do that. It's all working at the unconscious level, or the non-conscious. We can call it pre-conscious, subconscious, unconscious, however you want to call it. It's not the front and center of their thoughts. So yes, it can lead someone to act out that way. But the other thing is this. And again, I'm trying to weave in a bunch of different concepts, whether it's steamrolling people with your opinions, whether it's attacking others or trolling or anything like that. One of the outcomes of doing that is that you're taking the attention, your own attention, away from yourself. When you're externalizing, when you're going out, you don't have to look inward. Because when someone looks inward, and if they're not happy with that, it's a terrifying prospect, because they might have to come to terms with the fact that they've done nothing in life or haven't done enough. They haven't lived up to their expectations. They haven't found a sense of purpose. They're not living a life of meaning, right? They're not getting all the things that they think they're entitled or that they wanted to get. And when that's absent in life, that's like an existential crisis. And that's the ultimate fear, because the existential crisis and the ultimate fear is, I'm going to die having lived a meaningless life. And because, we're the only animals, at least that we know of. I think killer whales or orca and maybe some primates and other animals know this, but how do we know? But we're the only ones who know that we die, that we have a limited time on this planet. And, there's this whole theory. I'm not going to get into it, but the research behind it is terrible. I'll tell you right now, the research is garbage. But the premise makes sense. It's called terror management theory. And the idea is that so much of what we do in life is to unconsciously keep at bay the realization that we are going to die at some point. Because if you think about it, like that's a pretty sad and depressing concept. Once I'm gone, that's it. I'm done. That's why that's one of the reasons people have religion. That's one of the reasons people believe in reincarnation or something else. Sure. It takes the terror out of it, because this is not the end. It's only this step. There's another step afterward.
Yeah, because we cannot really feel into the nothingness, which is there. At least we think it's there when we die. And I mean, I can relate to that, having witnessed it just
yes.
go. And we need something to keep us human, even when in the face of death. And
I was going to say, just that comment that you just made, I think everybody should just go onto Google and type in Yalom, Y-A-L-O-M, Irving Yalom. Because he was a psychiatrist. He survived Auschwitz. I think it was Auschwitz. It might have been a different prison camp. And he somehow, A, maintained his humanity, B, maintained his faith in humanity, and C, was able to turn this into just a beautiful perspective. His quotes, if you want to live life properly or have an appreciation for life, just Google it. He wrote the book A Life. Oh my gosh, just everyone knows I had heart surgery in February and all this medication, and I lose words. My memory's off. So
Yeah.
so I just can't believe it's something I've recommended this book 1,000 times. A life
No
worth.
problem. We can look it up. Yalom, you said.
Right. So you don't have to read the book. All you have to do is Google Yalom quotes, and you'll just see the most beautiful perspective, the most positive and optimistic perspective on humanity. And I'm not that optimistic. Okay. So, but even I'm touched by what he says. And so, yes, so he found the way to find purpose, even in the worst of times.
And that is another question I have. How is it that some people, out of tragic events or even evil experiences with evil, create something beautiful, and others become murderers or something? That's what is that?
Right. That's the part that nobody's, okay, we don't know why, and unfortunately that's led people to make mistaken assumptions about the role, because you can have you can have triplets raised in the exact same environment with the same, under the same conditions, and all three, so let's say you have an abusive parent, and so one child identifies with the parent and becomes an abuser later on. One child maintains the victim role, and so they will always seek out other abusers, or they might not seek them out, but they might find them, or the abusers find them, and they can't extricate themselves from the relationship. And another person might say, I will swear off of any violence, not by myself or others. So three different people in the same environment, and what genetic or whatever factors might lead to that. Influences could have come in and slightly influenced one person different than the other, or the other. Actually. And so people say, you see, since these kids would be raised or would develop differently, the parents don't have the kind of impact on them that we think they do. And that's crazy. Of course they do. So what about the parenting? What about the observations that kids make? What about the interpretations they make of certain observations? What about the self-narrative that they develop going through life, not just with their family, but in other circumstances? What about the types of adversity and how they react to that? There's so many different factors that we can't predict why someone would go this way, this way, this way. But what I do say is this: when people try to have us, let's say, develop empathy for a monster and say, yeah, but this monster was raised in a terrible environment, I say that freedom of choice. Not everyone agrees with this, but I've worked with so many patients who went through horrible experiences as well. And instead of hurting other people, they either hurt themselves, or they don't, they somehow manage to make it through without hurting others or themselves. So when someone chooses to be a monster, okay, they may have been put on that pathway. They may have had very little choice, but there might have been a sliver. There was an opportunity, perhaps, at some point, that they could have removed themselves. And I don't want to oversimplify it, because that possibility, maybe they had 99% of energy against them, but they still had some choice. And I never want to rob us of that. To me, being human means A, we're flawed, B, we have a dark side, C, we're susceptible to doing things we would never want to do, but D, under certain circumstances, I would hope that we would somehow be able to, extricate ourselves from this mud of ugliness and retain and regain our humanity. That's what I would like to hope.
I have a question. I sense a little bit how Heidi is disturbed by these trolls. Right? Otherwise, this question wouldn't have come up. And I noticed in me that I somehow either respond with indifference or with some kind of curiosity or even empathy, and of course, there's a few questions in that. Are there gender differences, which also plays a little bit into this need of being right? Because I notice in the gender balanced groups that when men in front of other women have to admit that they're wrong, it diminishes, it creates shame in them and diminishes them maybe in the view of potential mates. And so I'm asking two questions now. But so one is, how do we respond to these people? On one side, not to encourage them and validate them, but on the other side, not put them down and develop maybe some of the, I mean, you're a public figure too, right? So how you get attacked and get wronged and things like
regularly,
that.
yeah.
And my second question is about gender differences, which will come up frequently in these conversations from me.
God forbid I mention gender differences, because in Canada right now, you say that you're a monster. And because I'm a man, I'm obviously a misogynist for saying that, for acknowledging the differences. We'll deal with each one. So how to deal with these people. I don't know if I'm maintaining my position as well as I'd like to, but I started off saying anytime someone comes at me, I will assume from the beginning they have good intentions. Okay, unless it's obvious that they don't. So I would start. I'd always be neutral with them, and I would, no matter what they said, I would try to be very civil, factual, and just, and answer their questions in earnest, and as long as it didn't take too much time. And that's how you deal with people, because for some of them, because there's a spectrum of trollhood. So there's the people who maybe are inadvertent trolls, and then there's the actual evil psychopathic trolls. So, and so most people are somewhere here, right? Only a few people are here. And so I assume that everyone's, they're not over here at first. And so I try to deal with them in a civil manner, and I just try to show them that they're wrong in their perceptions. Okay, that because most trolls, they're not, most non-trolls, but they look like they're trolls. They jumped the gun. They responded without really thinking. They didn't do their due diligence. This is one of the fatal flaws of society today. All you have to see is one headline, and people all of a sudden make all their schemata get triggered, and they assume if somebody said A, then this must mean B, C, D, E, F, G, H about them, and that gives me a right to jump in and pile on, even if I'm naturally a good person. So with those types of people, with persistence, I was able to show a number of them that they were wrong. I'm not this villain that they think. They're wrong, and that I'm worth talking to. I don't care if I think I'm worth talking to, but they're worth listening to, so that maybe they can have some more nuance in how they perceive people. That it's not just your A or B, that you're category good or bad, but there's all these things in between. So that's with most people. With actual trolls, if you do this and within 2 or 3 exchanges you realize they're trolls, you either just cut them out, because they will never change. You have to understand that a true troll will not change. And whether they're a psychopath troll or whether they're just an immature, pathetic troll who just gets their joy out of causing trouble,
things up, and
that's it. They don't have to be a psychopath to do that, but they have to be pretty pathetic. Okay, that's how they spend their time. That's not productive, right? There's no dealing with them, so I just either cut them out or I have fun with them. Okay. All right, I control.
And what is your emotional reaction when people come on strongly and somewhat?
My initial reaction, because I'm a human being,
incompetently criticizing you.
Well, if it's a legitimate criticism, anyone who pretends they're not affected by other people, even strangers, is lying to themselves, or has something in their brain that doesn't react normally, because we're wired to respond to this type of feedback. It's just the degree to which you respond. So I might get, at first, like, what was that? I might get offended, quote unquote, offended. I will never get hurt. Okay. No one has ever once, they can say the most horrific things. Hurt is not in my playbook. Okay. I'll feel bad and I'll feel hurt for other things, but never online by some troll or anyone else. Okay. Ever. But
But if it's in a lecture or something, then it's more it touches you more.
In a lecture,
face to face. Yeah.
Not hurt.
Don't students sometimes attack you or criticize you?
No. I've had some students attack me. It's not hurt at all. It's never hurt. It's funny with the lecture, I have more control over like how things turn out, only because we can see each other. We can have an actual discussion and everything. I'm actually calmer during a lecture, unless the only thing that worries me in a lecture is you're taking up other people's time, right? You're imposing your time or you're on everyone else. You're steamrolling the lecture. So then I'll be maybe a bit more curt. I'll try to be calm and be nice and polite and say, okay, let's put that aside, or talk to me after class. If you really feel strongly about this, talk to me. And for the most part, I have great exchanges in class. Not everybody agrees with me. I encourage disagreement. And even if someone is a little bit rude with me, no problem. I can handle it if they're willing to listen, if they're willing to engage. But a troll is not. And by the way, at the beginning of my more contentious classes, my human sexuality class, I say this to students, I start really strong. In the first 10 minutes, they hear more stuff in my more controversial material in 10 or 20 minutes of my class than they're going to hear in a whole term of any other professor, because anyone else would be terrified of saying these things. I say it, and I say, it's time to self-select. If you don't think that you can handle what I'm about to say, and I said, you don't have to agree with me, but you better be able to conduct yourself properly. So if you disagree with me, tell me why you disagree. Be civil, be respectful, because that's what I'm going to be. You know, and we'll be able to have a discussion. If you don't think you can do that, I say during the break, leave and don't come back. I'm not kicking them out. I'm telling them. So in that last couple of years, and so my class becomes, a lot of people say, but they recognize that this is what they're going to hear all term, and they've got to be prepared. And it's a challenge. You don't agree? Prove me wrong. And I've had my mind changed, or at least modified, lots of times. Okay, students provide information or and so on. I love it. It's a full engagement. I'm not talking down. I'll say, look, all I say to them is, you better be clear what is facts, what is empirical evidence, what is your opinion. I say, as long as you can differentiate, because I'll be the same when I teach. I'll tell them, here's my opinion, and this opinion is based on clinical evidence or research or whatever, and I'll say there's competing opinions. I can't tell you which one is right. I've chosen this one because of ABC. And other times I'll say, I have an opinion and I can't tell you why I have it. It's irrational, but I believe it, you know, and so I'm very clear about that. Okay. So anyway, I kind of went off on that a little bit, but the point is, the underlying point is, you can only engage with those who wish to engage productively, and those who do not, don't care what they think. They're not worth your time. If they're a psychopath, they're definitely not worth your time. And if there's some immature child or man child or woman child, or just someone who's so angry that they just, even if they've had a tough life, even if they're a very sympathetic person, if they refuse to engage like an adult, a civil, respectful adult, they're not worth your time, and you're just going to waste time. But one thing I do, and this is another thing you can do, if you're dealing with someone like that, again, they're not a troll, but they don't have good control over their emotions. They're not able to present their arguments effectively. They're arguing from the heart, not the mind, so to speak. Okay, they're not bad people. They just conduct themselves poorly. The best thing you can do in those cases is engage with them in a way that you know you're not going to change their mind, but you can affect other people who are watching, because they can juxtapose your behavior with their behavior, and they can go, oh, geez, is that how I come across? I don't want to be like that. I'd rather be like this person who's being completely nice and civil and so on. So that's who I often reach out to when I engage with those people. Okay. So.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to come back to this hurt thing. Today, everybody says they are hurt. And I have also in my group, especially women, and I feel sometimes hurt too, but I have learned to take responsibility for my own feelings. But I wanted to ask, how much do the personality traits influence here? Because I'm certainly relatively high on neuroticism, and many women are, I would say. And so you probably are not as high there, because you can handle it more easily. I feel myself often triggered, and I have a hard time not to respond immediately, shoot against, and I realize that. So what can we do? Let's say we women, although I'm aware that not all women are like this, but quite a few, I know. How can we deal with that better and get more, let's say, rational? It's not rational, because I'm also rational, but not.
Let's say less emotional.
Triggered or
less triggered, yeah, less emotional.
Especially by males.
Well, and this kind of will answer sort of Martin's question about the gender difference on the big five. Women.
I can only laugh, because if people are so stupid to not believe in science anymore, only because they think that their own ideas or whatever that comes from is more worth than scientific research. We know that from integral theory, when you are in postmodernism in the green level, then it's everything which comes before rules and science. It's just a no. And how stupid is that? And I really say that always loud, because
Right.
I can only laugh and cry at the same time, because you have to deal with people who
Right.
are
Because men and women suffer because of it.
Yeah, well, everyone suffers because of that. And unfortunately, the people in charge the people in a position, that was the wrong word, the people in a position who could make a difference. So academics, and I don't mean just university, I'm talking about in schools, because you have these kids in your class from a young age, scientists, researchers, public figures, politicians. These are the people who could try to stem the tide of this stupidity, and they're not. Okay. So it's up to a small group of us trying to fight against this and not be labeled as monsters or Nazis or anything else like that. Who, again, I think I may have said this before. I'm not sure if in our podcast before, my grandmother escaped Auschwitz. Okay. Most of my family got wiped out during the Holocaust. So calling me a Nazi, I'm a fan of irony, and that doesn't hurt me. That doesn't even offend me. My skin is so thick. However, Heidi, I will say, on the Big Five, when I did it in my master's year at university, I did the Big Five, and I show my students, my neuroticism score was literally off the charts. The score was so high, they didn't even have a number for that. Okay. Now, most of my neuroticism, though, was anger and hostility. That's where my neuroticism kind of landed. Okay. But yes, women are more emotional than men on average, whether it's genetics, which it seems to be, possibly, whether it's upbringing, whether it's socialization. So whatever the case may be, what do you do with it? Here's what you do. If you're a man or a woman, neurotic or not, the first thing, and it's going to sound so simple and silly, but I can't stress this enough. And more people better start doing this. I do this to everybody. Learn to breathe properly.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
It's essential. And I'm actually writing a book right now, and this is part of my book. And the person who's helping me, she's a huge yoga fanatic. And so much of what I'm saying, she's so happy because this is yoga principles, meditative principles, Buddhist principles, spiritual principles. And that's not who I am. I'm not a Buddhist. I'm not I don't do yoga. I don't do any of that, but I know what works. And so learning to breathe properly, and I'm not going to do it here, but just everyone should check it out. It's not taking deep breaths. If you take a deep breath and you're going like this, you're doing it wrong. It's learning to breathe through your diaphragm. So when you take a deep breath, your chest and shoulders don't move at all. You learn to breathe only through your diaphragm. Everyone should Google diaphragmatic breathing. And even if you learn it, again, make sure your chest and shoulders don't move. The reason that's so important is it slows down your system. If you're emotionally, a highly charged emotional person, your nervous system, it gets triggered much easier. If you breathe slower, you're actually making yourself less sensitive to external or internally produced stimuli. So that's why I tell people, you just learn to breathe. I help people learn to breathe through panic attacks. I help people learn to breathe through post-traumatic reactions, through anger, through fear. So you have to learn to breathe properly. That's the first step. Because when you learn to breathe, you're not going to lash out.
So what you say is that I have to take on singing again, because I know how to breathe, but I don't sing anymore for quite a while. So I should do that.
Singers, actors, and yoga people all know how to do diaphragmatic breathing. That's the first thing that you learn. So yes, maybe take on singing, and that will also relieve stress, and it will activate certain parts of the brain that may have been a bit dormant recently, and that'll give you another type of energy, because neuroticism is negative energy. All right, whether it's sadness or fear. Okay.
It will also help me to overcome that thing, because I had a sort of a refusal, because it was a profession, and so I had to be good and perfect, and so I kept it away, and so now I have to integrate it in a more, let's say, dilettantic way and not be ashamed to not be perfect, So maybe that's my next learning step.
Okay, well, Heidi, you know what you're going to do next? This is your homework, okay? And I'm not joking, I'm being totally serious, right? You're going to go to a karaoke bar, okay? I don't know if you drink or not. You might have a drink. It doesn't matter.
No, but I sing opera. I don't sing these things, so I have
doesn't
to.
Matter. Doesn't matter.
Okay.
There's no opera karaoke in Italy. Come on.
Opera karaoke. I don't know. Okay, go ahead.
Seriously, you're going to find a karaoke bar, right? And find a popular song that everybody knows. Take a Beatles song, whatever. Yeah, that'll get them coming in droves. But if you have that voice, you have that ability to go into karaoke, it's liberating. It's totally liberating. Okay. And that's what people have to do. That's why so many people, when they get so angry on the internet, it's because they don't have other outlets. This is their outlet.
Yeah.
Right. People who have other things to do are less inclined. Now, this is coming from someone, even when I was working 100-hour weeks, I was still feeding my addiction. I was still on Twitter and doing this stuff on the internet. So I'm a bit of a hypocrite here. Actually, no, it's not a hypocrite. I'm actually evidence that, because I wasn't being a troll, I was tending to other matters reasonably and responsibly. But, I wasn't getting hurt or whatever else. So again, find something to do, breathe, be more positive, be more productive. And then when it comes to the actual exchanges, okay, it's having the right perspective. Because if you can breathe, you can step back and say, I'm probably not going to win. Most people feel like I go in there and I have the sense I want to win. Okay. But it's not against the person. I know that if I do it right, other people will see it. And I know I've won the battle. Now, that's my childish part. And you have to admit it. If you want to change, you have to admit these things. So even to this day, still, there's a part of me I've just got to go in there. Whether it's I've got to be the funnier person or I've got to be the more intelligent or whatever else, I'm going to come out the winner. And whether it's because other people see it or because I'm going to crush this person, that's part of me going there. I have that need. I step back. I recognize this. Okay. And I go, all right, I'm going to put it down. I'm going to now approach this from a healthier perspective. Okay. And that's a conscious decision. And I'm breathing and doing this all. But to deny that part of my brain, the only thing the one good thing I can say is 30 years or 25 years ago, the thing I just described, that need to win, that was this much of my brain. It was like 99%. Okay.
It's a nice
skill. All right. It's what we call it self. Okay. I step back, I go, oh yeah, that's me. That's the immature me. That's the jerk me. I know it. I've done it all my life. That's fine. But let's put it aside and let's now be productive. That's right. Okay. And that's what people have to do. And it's a multi-step process. They have to be honest with themselves and recognize that they are getting triggered. And so many people that come after me, I'll tell you right now, this discrepancy between how insightful they think they are, how virtuous they think they are, and how uninsightful and how whatever the opposite of virtuous is, okay, depraved they are, okay, that discrepancy is huge. And that's the danger. And that's why I say you have to accept it first. You have to be honest about yourself and recognize that you are flawed. Now, I know talking to a perfectionist, I know it's going to be hard for you, Heidi, but learning, accepting that we're not perfect and that we have a dark side. And by the way, this is what I always stress to people. All humans have a dark side. We just deal with it differently. My dark side is powerful. It's big. It's there. Yeah. It's lurking over my shoulder. It's not in a little closet. It's there at all times. And I know it's there. I keep it in check. But this protects me. It motivates me. It keeps me sane, so to speak. And because I have a very healthy relationship with it. I didn't always. Okay.
Yeah.
But people have to recognize. Okay.
Yeah, I can say I'm working on that for quite a while. So I'm not the complete perfectionist anymore. But sometimes,
Well, perfectionism to a degree, healthy perfectionism has its merits. It's the unhealthy perfectionism, the neurotic perfectionism that's going to, drive you crazy. So yeah, so that dark side, because the person who can't admit that they have a dark side or can't admit that they're being triggered and they want to get back at that person, they're going to do it. They're going to keep acting that way and they're going to lie to themselves and pretend. They're going to frame it in a different light. I'm not being a monster. I'm taking down the monster. That's why society, that's why there's so much of this finger pointing. And again, what we call virtue signaling, showing everybody else, I'm a good person. I'm on the right side. And my opponent is a Nazi. He's a monster. He's a misogynist. And women are more likely to think this way in some areas, like in the left, okay, the left. But we have men doing the exact same thing, but they're more likely to be on the right. Okay, quote unquote right. So I don't want to say that men are less likely to do that. They are. They just lie to themselves slightly differently. And there are a lot of men who are lying to themselves exactly like the quote unquote women are. Okay, virtue signaling and so on. And the interesting thing, and this is something that people don't like to talk about. We're running out of time. I'm just going to throw this out there, okay? And it's not just to be cruel. I'm saying this objectively. If you look at the men who identify with these women's groups and so on, and this is coming from a self-proclaimed male feminist. My mother was a powerful woman, okay? She was a powerful, healthy feminist. Not a political feminist, not an academic feminist, but just by nature a feminist. And my definition of feminism is simply, the equality, not equity, it's equality. We're different people, different types, but we're equal human beings, right? And deserve equal pay for equal work, etc. So I'm fully like that. But the guys who claim to be like this, and who, the ones who identify with the women's struggles or the trans struggles, whatever, who overly identify with it. So I identify with it in the sense of I understand what you're feeling, I understand why you feel that way, and I'll try to help you however I can. But I don't have a need to be loved by these people, and I don't have a need to pretend that I'm one of them. That's the over-identification, okay? The guys who do that and over-identify, look at them. None of them, or very few, almost none of them would be what we would call a real man. They have not benefited from they have not derived the benefits of manhood in society. Now, is there benefits of womanhood? Yes. Women derive certain benefits. Men derive benefits. Tall people derive certain benefits, right? People who can talk fast derive certain benefits. People who are athletic derive certain benefits. We all derive benefits from something. And women, however, part of it's true, part of it's a bit exaggerated, but there's no doubt that in certain contexts, women have had it worse than men, just like men have had it worse than women in certain contexts. And these guys are identifying with women, having it worse in the sense, if it's real or not, doesn't matter, but this powerlessness. And when it comes to physical powerlessness, okay, physical powerlessness, that's a fact. Since the beginning of time, we're dimorphic. Men are bigger. Women do have this threat of violence, whatever else, which so do men, big men, small men. We have the threat, but it looks different. So these guys, if you look at them, they have identified with this powerlessness, with this being oppressed, with this victimhood, okay? And with it, they have the same level of discrepancy between how insightful they are and how insightful they think they are, and how virtuous they are, and how reprehensible they are. And that allows them to act in the same terrible way, thinking that they're saving the world, okay, lying to themselves. And at the whole time, I want to stress, I know Jordan Peterson talks about this too, but I've been talking about this for years. While they think they're saving the world, what they're really doing is they're avoiding looking inward, avoiding changing themselves, and avoiding becoming better individuals, okay? And again, it's not just these weak people on the left. It can be, people on the right as well who are equally weak, but it just looks different. Okay, they're weak-minded, maybe, weak identity. Okay. So anyway, so I'm not sure how I framed that, but it all boils down to, if you can't be honest with yourself, you are not going to develop into the type of person you would like to be. Rather, you're just going to keep lying to yourself and say that the rest of the world is unfair, the rest of the world is oppressive, the rest of the world is evil, and whether that world is the male patriarch, the patriarchal male, misogynistic, whatever, or whether it's whites against others, like democracy, colonialism, capitalism, right? They will always find a boogeyman, okay, rather than look inside themselves. And again, I want to be very clear. That's not to say that racism and sexism, etc., doesn't exist.
Absolutely, yeah.
Of course it exists, but we can't let it define us, and we can't let it oppress us. We have to fight through it, and everybody's going to have different disadvantages. I'm a white male. I'm a heterosexual, blah, 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 white male. Hey, at least I'm not able-bodied anymore. I have an artificial heart valve. I had kidney of the cancer. My kidney removed 2 years ago. I'm blind without my glasses. My body's a mess in many ways, right? Did I let that stop me? No. I am more physically active than a lot of people are in my own ways. After I had my surgery, I think I was teaching 5 days later.
Yeah, that may be a little bit exaggerated, no? I mean.
No, 5 days. 5 days.
Yeah. That's what men do. They don't respect their body needs. Yeah, we can be a little bit of different ideas there.
It's a little bit hyper, whatever. But the fact is, I knew what I was doing, and I didn't push myself too much. But I made sure I was not ignorant about it. I knew what I could and couldn't do, and I pushed myself to the limit of what I could do in a healthy way. And instead of saying, "Oh, poor me, I have cancer, my heart's about to explode," I didn't say that. I said, I'm going to fight. So that can apply to any weakness anyone has.
I completely agree that we need to, let's say, the peace in the world begins first with ourselves, to get really to know ourselves as well as possible, and especially the bad sides. That's the most important. The dark sides.
Except we're flawed.
Yeah, and really see it. And this is disastrous, I remember when I did this deep dive for 3 or 4 days, I was only crying, when I understood what is there. Anyway, it's needed. This is like the dive in the underworld, and then the resurrection. And this is in circles, I guess, that we need to do that. And then when we are sort of having a handle of ourselves, that's my belief, then we can try to go into communication with others and then find a way to communicate. That's why my question was there. And before, when we in our small circles cannot have a way to communicate and understand each other, how can we pretend to make peace in the world? I mean, for me, it's absolutely impossible. And we can do technology and whatever we do, we can do a whole lot of stuff, but that's not bringing the peace in the world. But Martin, I want to give you still a little bit of some word, because I'm noticing that I'm talking away with Oren.
No, that's wonderful. I'm learning a lot. Thank you, Oren, for what you share. And I know we're almost out of time, but I don't know if you have the ability for a short answer.
I got 30 seconds.
Yeah. Oh, that's just enough time to ask the question. So maybe we reserve that for another time, because that wouldn't be fair to the listener or to anyone. And at least not fair to you.
I wish I could spend more time, but I do have my patients. I have to be responsible to my patients.
We want to be respectful of that.
Yeah, and thank you to have given us this time where you normally would eat, probably. And I hope you get some bite before you have to go on with your day.
Food.
Take care.
It was an honor to meet you. Thank you for sharing your wisdom.
Thank you very much. It was a great pleasure to speak with both of you.
It was really nice.
Well, again, you know where to find me. I'd be more than happy to do so again.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you, Oren.
Great. Bye-bye, then.
Bye-bye.